To truly understand why Hitler ultimately lost World War II, we must first examine how he came dangerously close to winning it. His early victories were swift, shocking, and seemed to signal the rise of an unstoppable force across Europe. In the 1930s, Germany was a nation in ruins, humiliated, impoverished, and struggling to recover from the devastation of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles had left the country economically crippled and its people desperate for hope. Hitler, a masterful propagandist and charismatic speaker, promised to restore German pride and power. He captivated the masses with grand visions of revival, using propaganda to unite the country behind his cause. He quickly dismantled democracy, rebuilt the military, and openly defied the Treaty of Versailles, reoccupying the Rhineland and annexing Austria without facing any real resistance from other European powers. Britain and France, desperate to avoid another catastrophic war, chose appeasement. At Munich, they handed over Czechoslovakia, hoping to satisfy Hitler's ambitions. Instead, this only emboldened him, convincing Hitler that the West would not stand in his way. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, unleashing a new kind of warfare that stunned the world. Britain and France declared war, but Hitler's blitzkrieg tactics, lightning-fast attacks combining tanks, planes, and infantry, overwhelmed Poland and, soon after, Western Europe. The speed and coordination of these assaults left his enemies reeling. Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France fell in rapid succession, their defenses collapsing under the relentless German advance. The British barely escaped at Dunkirk, managing a miraculous evacuation that saved thousands of soldiers but left Europe in Nazi hands. By the summer of 1940, Hitler controlled most of continental Europe. His armies seemed unstoppable, and his vision of a new order appeared within reach. Only Britain stood defiant, battered but unbroken in the Battle of Britain. The courage of the Royal Air Force and the resilience of the British people kept hope alive for the Allies. Hitler's early success was built on speed, surprise, and the hesitation of his enemies. Each victory seemed to confirm his belief in his own invincibility. But these triumphs bred overconfidence among Hitler and his inner circle, blinding them to the dangers ahead and setting the stage for the catastrophic mistakes that would follow. The seeds of defeat were sown in the arrogance of victory. What seemed like unstoppable momentum would soon unravel as the costs of hubris became clear. Hitler's early victories led to fatal arrogance. At Dunkirk, he halted his tanks, allowing over 330,000 Allied troops to escape, a gift to his enemies. In the Battle of Britain, he shifted the Luftwaffe's focus from RAF airfields to bombing cities, giving the RAF time to recover and win the skies. Hitler underestimated both the Soviet Union and the United States, believing both would collapse quickly or never fully mobilize. Declaring war on America after Pearl Harbor, he turned a European conflict into a global one against overwhelming industrial and military might. His refusal to listen to his generals and his ideological obsessions doomed Germany to a war it could not win. Hitler's hubris and misjudgments created a coalition of enemies Germany could never defeat. Hitler's greatest blunder was invading the Soviet Union in June 1941. This decision would ultimately seal the fate of Nazi Germany, setting in motion a catastrophic chain of events that would change the course of World War II. Operation Barbarossa was the largest land invasion in history, involving over 3 million Axis troops. Its goal was nothing less than the total destruction of the USSR, the capture of Moscow, and the seizure of the Soviet Union's vast natural resources to fuel the German war machine. Early German advances were swift and overwhelming, with entire Soviet armies encircled and destroyed. But the Germans fatally underestimated Soviet resilience, the sheer size of Russia, and the brutality of its winters, a miscalculation that would prove disastrous. As the Germans pushed deeper, their supply lines stretched to the breaking point. Roads turned to impassable mud in autumn and then to ice in winter, halting the advance and leaving troops stranded far from home. Ill-equipped for the bitter cold, German soldiers froze and starved. Supplies dwindled, and morale plummeted as Soviet resistance stiffened and the temperature dropped to deadly lows. The Red Army, better prepared for winter warfare, launched a fierce counterattack near Moscow. Against all odds, they stopped the Germans just miles from the city, shattering Hitler's dream of a quick victory. What was supposed to be a lightning campaign became a grinding war of attrition. German troops faced endless combat, exhaustion, and mounting casualties as the front lines stagnated. The Eastern Front devoured German resources and manpower at an unsustainable rate. Supplies, reinforcements, and medical care could not keep up with the relentless demands of the campaign. For every German killed in the West, 4 died in the East. The scale of losses was staggering, with entire divisions wiped out and equipment left abandoned in the snow. Hitler was now trapped in a two-front war, bleeding his army in Russia while facing growing Allied power in the West. The strategic blunder of Barbarossa left Germany vulnerable on all sides. The road to Berlin began with the frozen failure outside Moscow. The myth of German invincibility was shattered, and the tide of war began to turn. Barbarossa marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. The world now saw that the German war machine could be stopped and defeated. The war's momentum had shifted. The Red Army was now on the offensive, pushing relentlessly westward, and the fate of the Third Reich was sealed. Stalingrad marked the true turning point on the Eastern Front. Hitler's obsession with the city led him to commit vast resources, turning a strategic target into a personal crusade. The battle devolved into brutal urban warfare, Rattenkrieg, where every building was a battleground. While Germans fought for inches, the Soviets prepared a massive counterattack. In November 1942, Operation Uranus encircled the German Sixth Army, trapping over 250,000 men. Hitler refused to allow retreat, promising impossible resupply by air. Starving and freezing, the German army was forced to surrender in February 1943. Of those captured, only a fraction survived captivity. Stalingrad shattered German morale and proved the Red Army could destroy the Wehrmacht. The tide of war had turned irreversibly against Hitler. As Germany bled in the east, the Western Allies forged a powerful coalition. Britain, the US, and the Soviet Union set aside differences to defeat Hitler, coordinating strategy and resources. The Germany First policy focused Allied might on Europe, while the Soviets absorbed the brunt of German attacks. Allied bombing crippled German industry and forced Hitler to divert resources from the front. Joint campaigns in North Africa and Italy stretched German defenses even further. Each operation required unprecedented cooperation and logistics. The Allies' combined strength and coordination set the stage for the final assault on Hitler's empire. United, the Allies became an unstoppable force. The noose around Germany tightened. In 1944, the Allies launched Operation Overlord, D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history. Allied deception convinced Hitler the main attack would come elsewhere, leaving Normandy vulnerable. On June 6th, Allied forces stormed the beaches, facing fierce resistance but ultimately breaking through. Hitler's delayed response and misplacement of panzer divisions gave the Allies time to secure their foothold. With the Red Army advancing from the east and the Western Allies from the west, Germany was caught in a deadly pincer. The liberation of Paris symbolized the collapse of Nazi control in Western Europe. The nightmare of a two-front war had become reality. German armies were being crushed between two unstoppable forces. D-Day marked the beginning of the end for the Third Reich. The walls were closing in. America's entry into the war changed everything. The attack on Pearl Harbor galvanized the nation, uniting Americans behind a single purpose: total victory. Overnight, the United States transformed from a nation at peace to the world's greatest war machine. U.S. factories, untouched by the devastation of war, became the arsenal of democracy. They produced weapons, vehicles, and supplies on a scale Germany couldn't even dream of matching. Every day, thousands of tanks, planes, and trucks rolled off the assembly lines, fueling the Allied advance. The Lend-Lease program sent a flood of arms and equipment to both Britain and the Soviet Union, overwhelming German production and keeping Allied armies fighting on every front. For every German tank that rolled onto the battlefield, the Allies built dozens in response, ensuring numerical superiority. For every German plane, the Allies produced hundreds, filling the skies with bombers and fighters that dominated the air war. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union mobilized its entire society for war. Factories were relocated east of the Urals, safe from German bombs, and Soviet workers, men and women alike, labored day and night, outproducing Germany in tanks and artillery. The legendary T-34 tank, combined with Soviet resilience and determination on the battlefield, proved decisive in turning the tide against the Nazis. The USSR endured staggering losses, over 27 million dead, countless cities and villages destroyed. But the Soviet people never broke, fighting on with unyielding spirit. Allied soldiers were well-equipped, well-fed, and constantly resupplied, giving them a crucial edge on the battlefield. In contrast, German troops faced chronic shortages, worn-out equipment, and exhaustion, their resources stretched to the breaking point. The combination of American industrial might and Soviet sacrifice created a vice that closed relentlessly on Nazi Germany, squeezing from both east and west until there was nowhere left to run. Hitler could not outfight, outproduce, or outlast the Allies. In the end, defeat was inevitable, and the world would never be the same. By spring 1945, Germany was collapsing from all sides. Hitler, isolated in his bunker, issued delusional orders as his empire crumbled. On April 30th, he took his own life. A week later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. Hitler lost because of his arrogance, strategic blunders, and underestimation of his enemies. He turned a regional conflict into a global war he could never win. The Allies' unity, resources, and resolve proved decisive. The defeat of Nazi Germany is a warning against unchecked power and blind ideology. Even the mightiest regime, driven by hate and hubris, will fall before the united will of free nations.